You are currently inhabiting a biological state of metabolic leakage, and it is the primary reason your strategic expansion feels like a constant struggle against a rising tide of parasitism. You believe that generosity, sharing, and social empathy are moral virtues that provide you with community support and moral capital. This is a terminal civilizational hallucination. In the raw, unyielding arena of the persistence hunt, sharing is a metabolic tax on excellence. It is the mechanism by which the hierarchy ensures that no individual organism can ever sequester enough life force to challenge the grid. You are currently helping others, while the matrix is busy liquidating your reserves. We are now prisecting the biology of the guard, showing you why guarding the cash is the ultimate act of sovereignty, and how the apex predator utilizes metabolic stinginess to move from the frequency of the provider to the frequency of the governor of the substrate. The human nervous system is equipped with an ancestral evaluation circuit, optimized for a landscape of extreme scarcity. For millions of years, an organism's survival depended entirely on its ability to identify, capture, and defend a high-density energy source. This is the resource-guarding instinct. When a predator makes a kill, it does not invite the swarm. It bristles, it snarls, and it prepares for total biological combat against anyone who attempts to dilute its prize. This is not greed, it is biophysical realism. The cache, whether it is a carcass, a territory, or a digital ledger of capital, is the only thing that stands between the organism and the abyss of entropy. The Matrix has performed a neural hijack on this circuit, shaming your natural impulse to guard your calories and replacing it with a domesticated guilt. They want you to feel bad for being selfish because a selfish predator is an unauditable threat. Consider the pathology of performative empathy. The hierarchy has designed the social fabric of the 21st century to be a systemic siphon. Every ask for your time, every guilt trip for your resources, and every social obligation is a metabolic strike against your garrison. Most of you are socially liquid. You have no walls. You allow the unevolved swarm, the friends who never build, the family who only consume, the colleagues who compete for crumbs, to have direct access to your metabolic surplus. You are spending your life force to maintain the comfort of others. This is strategic sabotage. While you are busy being a good person, the sovereign architect is busy sequestrating his voltage. He understands that in the predatory landscape of 2026, the only moral obligation that matters is the integrity of his own perimeter. He does not share his hunt, he fortifies his core. We must analyze the neurochemistry of the giver's deficit. When you yield your resources to the swarm out of social pressure, your brain undergoes a systemic drop in serotonin. You feel resentful, drained, and vulnerable because your primal circuits recognize that you have just reduced your own survival probability. This state of resentful submission triggers the release of chronic cortisol, which inhibits the prefrontal cortex and narrows your strategic focus. You become reactionary. You lose the apex vision because you are too busy managing the demands of the parasites. The sovereign predator maintains hormonal integrity. He practices metabolic stinginess. He understands that his patience, his aggression, and his clarity are all dependent on the density of his cache. He guards his time and his focus with the same lethal intent that an ancestor guarded a waterhole in a drought. The architecture of resource guarding requires a transition from access to control. Most of you operate in a flat network. Anyone with your phone number or your email address can invoice your attention. This is informational vulnerability. You are a public resource. The sovereign architect utilizes gated access architecture. He creates a structural filter between himself and the world. He utilizes automated systems, informational enclaves, and private jurisdictions to ensure that his energy vents are invisible to the swarm. He understands that scarcity of access is the source of value. He does not network. He annexes selective alliances. He reaches a point of metabolic sovereignty where he no longer participates in the sharing economy of the matrix. He is the owner of the supply, and he dictates the terms of the flow. The transition from providing to garrisoning requires the utilization of the protocol 260 for those ready to move from the metabolic waste of the altruistic slave to the high-voltage sovereignty of the auditor. The protocol provides the digital perimeter. You utilize the AI machine to build self-guarding assets. These are systems that generate yield without requiring your social presence. They operate in the informational abyss, capturing the attention and the calories of the swarm while you remain in the silence of the core. This automated surplus is not shared. It is sequestrated into substrate. You use the flow to buy back your time sovereignty and to fund your private law. You are building a world within a world, a garrison where you are the only entity with the master key. By the time the unevolved realize that you have won, you have already moved your entire existence into a non-auditable atmosphere. We must observe the neurochemistry of the guarded state. There is a profound hormonal transformation that occurs when you finally say no to the demands of the matrix. The social anxiety of the people pleaser is replaced by the absolute stillness of the owner. Your brain no longer scans for approval because you possess the material density required to survive without the herd. This is the winner effect in its most concentrated form. You have reached the point of biological authority, where your presence is not an offer of help, but a broadcast of power. You have moved from the frequency of the prey, the one who is shared, to the frequency of the predator, the one who owns. You are no longer part of the community. You are the architect of the order. The entropy of the sharing is caring. Narrative is the final cage. The giants want you to contribute to the common good, because the common good is the fuel for their machine. They want you to be connected so they can audit your flow. Community is the term the hierarchy uses to keep the cattle in the pen. The sovereign predator focuses on selective isolation. He understands that his primary moral obligation is to the continuity of his house, not the appetite of the hive. He reaches a point of jurisdictional independence where he provides his own reality to those within his perimeter. He has achieved temporal independence. He is the judge of his own cash, and his internal law is the only standard that survives the coming reset. Recognition of this biological requirement is the only way out of the mud. You must move from the horizontal plane of the generous subject to the vertical axis of the sovereign auditor. You must stop helping and start acquiring. The hunt is not a social experiment. It is a specific target acquisition of the time and the territory that defines your existence. You must decide what you are. Are you the donor whose life force is being distributed among the scavengers, or the sovereign predator who has sequestrated his cash to fund his own empire? The primal code is not about being nice. It is about biological integrity. Find the coordinate where the swarm cannot reach your reserves and put all your metabolic weight on it. Stand up, audit your empathy leaks, and begin the final fortification of your sovereign kingdom. The abyss is waiting for the open, but the substrate is waiting for the sovereign. Stop sharing and start garrisoning your destiny. You are currently inhabiting a state of social infestation, and it is the primary reason your metabolic surplus is failing to crystallize into permanent sovereign mass. You believe that your social circle is a collection of meaningful relationships based on mutual history, shared values, and emotional support. This is a terminal civilizational hallucination. In the raw, unyielding arena of the persistence hunt, the majority of your network is not a support system. It is a scavenger grid. These organisms are biologically programmed to identify the apex producer, the individual who captures more force than he consumes, and to attach themselves to his energy vents under the guise of friendship or loyalty. You are currently maintaining connections. While the hierarchy is busy auditing your leaks, we are now presecting the biology of the social parasite, showing you why cutting people off is a strategic necessity and how the apex predator utilizes clinical liquidation to move from the frequency of the host to the frequency of the sovereign lord. The human nervous system is an evolutionary organ of social mimicry. For millions of years, fitting in was a survival strategy, but the Matrix has performed a neural hijack on this mechanism. It has created a culture where setting boundaries is labeled as arrogance and protecting your resource is labeled as toxic. This is strategic sabotage. By shaming your guarding instinct, the hierarchy ensures that your life force is constantly diluted among the unevolved swarm. This ensures that you never accumulate the capital density required to build a private garrison. Every time you pick up the check, every time you listen to a mediocre problem, and every time you give free advice to a non-producer, you are performing a metabolic subsidy of the weak. You are burning apex energy to fuel the stagnation of others. The sovereign architect performs a clinical audit of proximity. He asks, is this organism a force multiplier or is it a metabolic sink? If the answer is the latter, it is a social liability and it is slated for immediate liquidation. Consider the pathology of the victim scavenger. This is the most dangerous type of parasite in the 2026 landscape. They do not attack you with force, they attack you with induced guilt. They inhabit a state of chronic crisis. They utilize their weakness as a tool for resource extraction. Because you possess the hormonal drive to solve problems, your brain is triggered to help. This is a neurological trap. Every calorie you spend solving a scavenger's crisis is a calorie stolen from your own territorial annexation. The scavenger does not want to win. They want to eat your win. They are the energy vampires of the digital age. The sovereign predator understands emotional stillness. He recognizes that empathy is a finite metabolic resource. He does not waste his internal voltage on those who refuse to hunt. He practices biological indifference. He leaves the scavengers to the abyss of their own choices while he focuses 100% of his weight on the hard substrate of his empire. We must analyze the neurochemistry of social obligation. When a scavenger makes a small request for your time or resources, your brain experiences a status check. If you say no, your ancestral circuits fear social exclusion. This fear triggers a release of cortisol, making you feel anxious and guilty. The Matrix utilizes this neurological shackle to keep you polite and available for extraction. But the sovereign architect performs a hormonal reset. He understands that his patience and his aggression are only possible when his cache is protected. He views every ask from a non-essential organism as a biological strike against his bloodline. This predatory clarity allows him to execute the liquidation strike without a second of hesitation. He does not explain his exit. He simply closes the energy vent. He moves into the informational silence, where the scavengers can no longer reach his pulse. The architecture of scavenger liquidation requires a transition from people-pleasing to boundary enforcement. Most of you are socially transparent. You allow the world to see your yield. This is informational vulnerability. The sovereign predator understands that visibility is a target. He utilizes strategic obscurity. He hides his resources behind layers of structural fog. He does not display his kill. He caches it in the shadows. He replaces friends with strategic allies, other apex producers who operate on the same high frequency. These alliances are not based on empathy, but on mutual annexation. In the apex tier, there is no scavenging. There is only the clinical exchange of force. For those ready to move from the metabolic waste of the infested slave to the high-voltage sovereignty of the auditor, the Protocol 260 provides the clinical architecture for this transition. You utilize the AI machine to replace the human scavengers in your system. The machine does not ask for favors. The machine does not feel entitled. It simply executes the code. We must observe the neurochemistry of the purge state. There is a profound hormonal expansion that occurs when you finally clear your life of metabolic sinks. The chronic sympathetic arousal caused by social friction disappears. Your serotonin levels rise as you realize that you are the absolute governor of your territory. This internal stillness provides the strategic clarity required to identify the large advantage. While the unevolved are busy navigating drama, the sovereign predator is busy engineering reality. He has moved from the frequency of the herd to the frequency of the source. He is no longer available for extraction. He has become a garrisoned entity. His time has been reannexed. His energy has been sequestered. His sovereignty has been achieved through the liquidation of the many for the sake of the one. The entropy of the good man narrative is the final cage. The giants want you to be a good man, meaning a man who is easy to milk. They want you to be kind, giving, and open, because an open organism is an auditable resource. The sovereign accountant focuses on dynastic integrity. He understands that his primary moral obligation is to ensure that the life force of his ancestors is not squandered on the mediocrity of the swarm. He reaches a point of jurisdictional independence where he provides his own reality to those within his perimeter. He has achieved temporal independence. He is the judge of his own proximity, and his silence is the most powerful signal he has ever broadcast. He is not mean. He is biologically correct. Recognition of this biological requirement is the only way out of the mud. You must move from the horizontal plane of the socialite to the vertical axis of the sovereign auditor. You must stop maintaining relationships and start liquidating liabilities. The hunt is not a social parade. It is a specific target acquisition of the focus and the autonomy that defines your existence. You must decide what you are. Are you the host that is being drained by the scavengers, or the sovereign predator who has purged the infection to fund his own empire? The primal code is not about being nice. It is about sequestrating reality. Find the coordinate where the noise stops and the execution begins, and put all your metabolic weight on it. Stand up, audit your empathy leaks, and begin the final liquidation of your social theater. The abyss is waiting for the infested, but the substrate is waiting for the sovereign. Stop belonging and start ruling. Your silence. You are currently inhabiting a state of structural vulnerability, and it is the primary reason your resource guarding instinct is causing you chronic stress rather than providing you with sovereign peace. You believe that security is a matter of having a better alarm system, a stronger password, or a more prestigious lawyer. This is a terminal civilizational hallucination. In the raw, unyielding arena of the persistence hunt, visibility is the precursor to liquidation. To own an asset in your own biological name is to broadcast your metabolic coordinates debts to every scavenger in the matrix. You are currently collecting titles, while the sovereign predator is busy annexing the shadows. We are now presecting the architecture of the vault, showing you why legal ownership is a slave protocol and how the apex architect utilizes structural sequestration to move from the frequency of the target to the frequency of the ghost in the system. The matrix has professionalized the discovery of force to ensure that no individual can ever accumulate a critical mass of unauditable energy. They have designed a legal and financial infrastructure that requires transparency, a term they use to describe the process of mapping your energy vents for future extraction. From the public land registry to the centralized bank account, every standard tool of wealth is a beacon for the hive. When you are transparent, you are auditable. When you are auditable, you are taxable. When you are taxable, you are controllable. The sovereign architect understands that to guard his cash, he must perform a total decoupling. He must separate his biological presence from his financial mass. He does not own the vault, he commands the protocol that governs the vault. Consider the pathology of the visible title. Most of you feel a sense of pride when you see your name on a deed or a corporate registry. This pride is a neurological trap. It is the serotonin of the domesticated primate seeking status within the hierarchy's grid. The moment your name is linked to an asset, that asset becomes a liability to your freedom. It can be frozen by a state click. It can be seized by a litigator. It can be used as leverage against your pulse. The sovereign predator understands informational opacity. He utilizes blind trusts, anonymized entities, and jurisdictional arbitrage to create a structural fog. By the time a scavenger tries to trace the source of the yield, they find themselves in a labyrinth of legal wrappers and encrypted ledgers that lead to nowhere. He is not hiding wealth, he is garrisoning reality. We must analyze the biology of the digital moat. In the physical past, the vault was made of stone and steel. In the landscape of 2026, the vault is made of mathematics and decentralized consensus. The sovereign architect understands that physical security is secondary to cryptographic sovereignty. He moves his primary cache into non-custodial environments, zones of the digital abyss where the state has no master key. He utilizes multi-signature protocols and encrypted substrates to ensure that his force can only be moved through the alignment of his specific will. This is the final perimeter. Even if the matrix captures his biological body, it cannot capture his energy infrastructure. He has achieved metabolic insulation. He is the owner of the code, and the code is the only law that survives the reset. The architecture of the sovereign vault requires a transition from centralized trust to algorithmic verification. Most of you trust the bank. You trust the legal system. You trust the stability of the hierarchy. This is strategic sabotage. Trust is a vulnerability that the scavengers exploit. The sovereign architect focuses on zero trust architecture. He utilizes the protocol 260 to build self-guarding assets, automated systems that execute his resource guarding through smart contracts. These systems do not ask for permission to defend the cache. They are programmed to automate the defense. If the environmental conditions change, if a regulatory strike occurs, or if a market reset is detected, the vault automatically performs a matter shift, moving the energy into a different jurisdictional frequency before the hive can react. He is not managing his wealth, he is programming his sovereignty. We must observe the neurochemistry of the fortified state. There is a profound hormonal transformation that occurs when you know that your core substrate is unauditable and unseizable. The chronic sympathetic arousal, the constant low-level fear of losing it all, evaporates. Your prefrontal cortex is released from the anxiety loop of survival, allowing you to inhabit the apex frequency of long-term strategy. You no longer make decisions out of fear. You make them out of calculated annexation. This hormonal stillness is what provides the natural authority that others sense but cannot explain. You radiate the stability of the stone, while the scavengers around you radiate the volatility of the vapor. You have moved from the frequency of the tenant to the frequency of the lord. The entropy of the individual ownership narrative is the final cage. The giants want you to believe that owning things makes you a sovereign individual. No. In the persistence hunt, ownership is a target. Control is the power. The sovereign accountant focuses on structural mass. He reaches a point of atmospheric sovereignty where his house is its own private state with its own rules of access and its own defense protocols. He no longer participates in the social contracts of the matrix because he has built a private contract with reality. He has achieved temporal independence. He is the judge of his own vault, and his internal law is the only accounting standard that matters. He is not saving for a rainy day. He is building the dam that dictates the flow of the river. Recognition of this biological requirement is the only way out of the mud. You must move from the horizontal plane of the property owner to the vertical axis of the sovereign architect. You must stop signing deeds and start coding perimeters. The hunt is not a financial strategy. It is a specific target acquisition of the structural autonomy that defines your existence. You must decide what you are. Are you the target whose wealth is being monitored and prepared for harvest, or the sovereign predator who has disappeared into the complexity of his own vault? The primal code is not about money management. It is about territorial annexation of the legal and digital void. Find the coordinate where the hive cannot see your cache and put all your metabolic weight on it. Stand up, audit your visibility leaks, and begin the final construction of your sovereign kingdom. The abyss is waiting for the transparent, but the substrate is waiting for the sovereign. Stop owning and start ruling the silence. You are currently inhabiting a state of neurological vulnerability, and it is the primary reason your external walls are consistently breached by the small asks and subtle extractions of the unevolved swarm. You believe that your inability to say no, your tendency to over-explain your boundaries, and your internal hesitation to prioritize your own cash is a personality trait related to kindness, politeness, or social harmony. This is a terminal civilizational hallucination. In the raw, unyielding arena of the persistence hunt, this hesitation is not a virtue. It is a signal of subordinate status. It is the prey response of an organism that still fears the social exclusion of the tribe more than it fears the biological liquidation of its own future. You are currently being nice, while your own nervous system is busy liquidating your sovereignty. We are now presecting the biology of the sentinel, showing you why guilt is a strategic weapon of the hierarchy and how the apex predator utilizes clinical detachment to move from the frequency of the servant to the frequency of the governor of the core. The human brain is an evolutionary organ of hierarchical integration. For millions of years, the will of the group was the only law that guaranteed survival in a landscape of apex predators and environmental resets. To be selfish, to guard your own calories while the group was hungry, was to risk exile, which was a certain biological death sentence. Consequently, your brain is equipped with a high-sensitivity exclusion alarm located in the anterior cingulate cortex. This is the social pain center. When you protect your resources, when you guard your time, your focus, and your capital against the demands of the swarm, this alarm triggers a cascade of cortisol and norepinephrine, manifesting as the crushing weight of guilt and social anxiety. The Matrix has performed a neural hijack on this specific circuit. It has professionalized the guilt trip, training you to believe that service to the hive is the only path to moral and physical safety. They have turned your ancestral survival instinct into a systemic siphon, ensuring that you never accumulate the hormonal floor required to stand alone. You are currently trapped in a neurological cage of empathy, and the hierarchy is preparing to milk your integrity until you are hollow. Consider the pathology of the social explanation. Most of you, when faced with a demand for your resources, your time, your expertise, or your capital, feel a profound, almost uncontrollable biological urge to justify your refusal. You provide reasons, you craft excuses, and you offer apologies. You want the scavenger to understand why you are saying no. This is strategic sabotage. From a clinical hierarchical perspective, an explanation is a submission signal. It is an admission that you are accountable to the person making the request, that they have the high ground and the right to audit your private decisions. By explaining, you invite negotiation. You are telling the scavenger that your no is not a fortified wall, but a price tag that can be lowered with enough social pressure or emotional manipulation. The sovereign sentinel understands the power of the absolute. He does not explain, he enforces. His no is a clinical fact of the environment, as immovable and indifferent as a mountain of stone. He understands that sovereignty is the absence of explanation. He has moved from the frequency of the defendant who pleads for his time to the frequency of the judge who dictates the law of his territory. We must analyze the neurochemistry of the sentinel shift. When you successfully guard your resources, when you refuse a low-value request without providing a metabolic subsidy of an explanation, your brain undergoes a systemic rise in serotonin. This is the reward of the owner. By asserting your internal law over the social pressure of the hive, you are signaling to your own nervous system that you are at the apex of your coordinate. This high serotonin state provides the strategic stillness and territorial confidence required to ignore the noise of the social swarm. Conversely, every time you yield out of guilt or apologize for your boundaries, your serotonin drops and your cortisol spikes, reinforcing your identity as a domesticated subject. You are literally hormonally engineering your own slavery with every polite concession. The sovereign predator performs a neurological reset. He practices sovereign silence. He views the guilt not as a moral compass, but as a systemic glitch, a legacy code inherited from a tribal world that no longer exists in the predatory landscape of 2026. He ignores the alarm and focuses entirely on the density of the substrate. The architecture of the sentinel mindset requires a transition from reactive empathy to calculated alignment. Most of you are empathetic organisms. You feel the needs and suffering of others as if they were your own biological signals. This is informational vulnerability. In the modern landscape, the matrix utilizes performative suffering and high-frequency requests to bypass your resource-guarding instincts. The scavenger presents a crisis, usually one born of their own metabolic inefficiency, to trigger your provider circuitry. The sovereign architect performs a clinical triage. He asks the only question that matters. Is this organism a force multiplier for my dynasty, or is it an entropy leak? He understands that true empathy is the preservation of the source. If he allows his cash to be dissipated among the unevolved and the lazy, he fails in his primary biological duty to his own bloodline and his own mission. He chooses the brutality of the garrison over the sentimentality of the hive. He is not cold in the eyes of the universe. He is biologically honest. He understands that a dead predator cannot protect its pride, and a bankrupted founder cannot fund a reset. The victim scavenger is the most sophisticated predator in your social environment because they do not hunt with strength, but with weakness. They utilize pity as a high-frequency extraction tool. They have learned that by broadcasting a signal of distress, they can trigger the mirror neuron system of the sovereign, forcing him to pay a metabolic ransom to make the discomfort stop. This is neurological terrorism. The sentinel recognizes this pattern instantly. He understands that giving to a parasite only finances the growth of the parasite. He disconnects his mirror neurons from the theater of the weak. He refuses to pay the ransom. He allows the scavenger to face the audit of reality without his intervention. This strategic coldness is what allows his cash to grow, while the surplus of his peers is being dissolved by the endless demands of the victim swarm. The transition from reaction to governance requires the utilization of the protocol 260. For those ready to move from the metabolic waste of the guilt-ridden slave to the high-voltage sovereignty of the auditor, the protocol provides the neurological buffer. You utilize the AI machine as your primary social interface. By automating your inbound communications and outbound filters, you remove the human friction that triggers your exclusion alarm. The machine does not feel guilty for refusing a low-value meeting or a parasitic ask. The machine does not over-explain or apologize for its program parameters. It simply executes the perimeter. This allows you to maintain your internal voltage for high-stakes annexation and dynastic construction, while the machine guards the energy vents with clinical indifference. You are not working on your mindset in the hope that you will eventually feel brave. You are outsourcing your will to a superior non-biological system. We must observe the neurochemistry of the isolated core. There is a profound hormonal transformation that occurs when you finally stop scanning for approval from the hierarchy. Your brain enters a state of deep strategic focus, where the opinion of the swarm becomes nothing more than background radiation, noise that has no impact on the trajectory of your hunt. You have achieved informational independence. This is the winner effect. In its terminal stage, you possess the high ground advantage because your internal state is no longer tethered to the volatility and emotionality of others. You have moved from the frequency of the tenant who fears eviction to the frequency of the lord who dictates the terms of the lease. You are the owner of your own nervous system, and your internal law is the only accounting standard that survives the systemic reset. The entropy of the self-sacrifice narrative is the final cage. The giants want you to believe that giving until it hurts is the mark of a great man. No, in the persistence hunt, giving until it hurts is an admission of biological defeat. It is the suicide of the producer for the benefit of the consumer scavenger. It is a redistribution of voltage that ensures no one ever reaches escape velocity. The sovereign predator focuses on absolute resource sequestration. He reaches a point of atmospheric sovereignty where his internal law dictates the value of everything within his perimeter. He no longer participates in the social contracts of the matrix because he has built a private reality backed by hard substrate, automated yield, and cryptographic certainty. He has achieved temporal independence. He is the judge of his own sacrifices, and his silence is the wall that protects his sovereign focus from the entropy of the hive. Recognition of this biological requirement is the only way out of the mud. You must move from the horizontal plane of the empathetic subject to the vertical axis of the sovereign auditor. You must stop apologizing for your existence and start guarding the force that makes your existence possible. The hunt is not a social experiment or a parade of virtues. It is a specific target acquisition of the mental and metabolic autonomy that defines your dynasty. You must decide what you are. Are you the variable that is being manipulated by the guilt trip of the matrix, or the sovereign predator who has hardened his mind and garrisoned his will to defend his empire? The primal code is not about being nice. It is about being formidable, lethal, and unauditable. Find the coordinate where the guilt stops and the sovereignty begins, and put all your metabolic weight on it. Stand up, audit your empathy leaks, and begin the final fortification of your internal kingdom. The abyss is waiting for the polite, but the substrate is waiting for the sovereign. Stop explaining and start ruling your reality. You are currently inhabiting the final coordinate of sequestration, and it is the only state of existence from which the Great Reset of 2026 can be viewed not as a catastrophe, but as a systemic liquidation of your competition. You have navigated the biology of the cache. You have purged the scavenger pathology. You have constructed the architecture of the vault, and you have forged the psychology of the sentinel. Now you stand within the ultimate garrison. You believe that the end goal of guarding your resources is to eventually feel safe, so you can finally relax and join the swarm in their consumption. This is a terminal civilizational hallucination. In the raw, unyielding arena of the persistence hunt, safety is an illusion, and relaxation is the first stage of neurological atrophy. The sovereign architect does not relax. He recalibrates. He moves from the frequency of defense to the frequency of asymmetric projection. We are now presecting the biology of the garrisoned lord, showing you why absolute resource protection is the precursor to infinite power, and how the Apex founder utilizes informational silence to move from the frequency of the winner to the frequency of the source of law. The human nervous system is an evolutionary organ optimized for territorial dominance. For millions of years, the ultimate survival signal was not just having enough, but controlling the access. The organism that owned the high ground, the waterhole, or the energy vent was the one who dictated the survival terms for the entire region. This is the garrison effect. When your resources are successfully guarded, when your time, your capital, and your focus are 100% sequestered within your own perimeter, your brain undergoes a total hormonal transformation. The chronic sympathetic arousal of the climber, the need to be seen, the need to prove, the need to defend, evaporates into a state of parasympathetic stillness. You are no longer competing with the matrix, because the matrix no longer has a hook in your metabolic substrate. You have reached the atmospheric sovereignty, where your internal law is the only accounting standard that survives the noise of the hive. Consider the pathology of the visible ruler. The hierarchy has designed the top tier of the matrix to be a theater of power, the billionaire lists, the socialite galas, the public political disputes. These are the visible peacocks, whom the hierarchy allows to exist as decoys. They are rich, but they are not sovereign. Their wealth is auditable, their movements are trackable, and their pulse is still tied to the status grid of the swarm. The sovereign architect understands that true power is inverse to visibility. He inhabits the invisible throne. He possesses the mass of a nation-state, but the surface area of a ghost. He moves his force through the informational shadows, utilizing digital enclaves, jurisdictional arbitrage, and private trust systems to ensure that the hierarchy cannot even identify the coordinates of his core. He is not avoiding the world. He is governing it through strategic absence. We must analyze the biology of asymmetric projection. Once your cache is fully protected and your metabolic cost is covered 100 times over by automated yield, you possess infinite strategic patience. You can wait for the market to reset, for the state to fail, or for the swarm to devour itself. You are not forced into any action by survival pressure. This allows you to execute the asymmetric strike. While the unevolved are busy fighting for crumbs in the light, you are identifying the foundational entry points in the dark. You utilize your sequestered surplus to buy the substrate when it is at its most fragile, buying the land, the energy, and the infrastructure for pennies on the dollar, because you were the only one who guarded the cash while everyone else was spending the signal. This is how you move from from guarding to ruling. You do not compete for resources, you annex the vacuum. The architecture of the ultimate garrison is maintained by the zero-leak protocol. Most men, even those with capital, have metabolic leaks. They have egos that need stroking, families that need status signals, and social circles that demand subsidies. These are the energy vents through which the matrix eventually liquidates them. The sovereign sentinel has capped every vent. He has moved his family into a dynastic OS that values sequestration over display. He has replaced friends with strategic aligned sentinels. He has automated his interaction with the hive using the protocol 260, ensuring that his pulse is never felt by the scavengers. He operates in a closed-loop reality where 100% of his captured force stays within his perimeter to fund his next expansion. He has achieved temporal independence. He is no longer aging for the system. He is evolving for his dynasty. The transition from guarding to creating requires the utilization of the protocol 260. For those ready to move from the metabolic waste of the vulnerable winner to the high-voltage sovereignty of the auditor, the protocol provides the governance layer. You utilize the AI machine to build a self-correcting garrison. These are systems that not only protect your resources, but automatically reinvest your surplus into hard substrate across multiple jurisdictions. You are no longer the manager of your wealth. You are the architect of the algorithm. The machine scans for hierarchical friction and systemic resets, moving your energy through the digital abyss with a velocity that the matrix cannot track. You have reached the point where your financial presence is a ghost, but your structural impact is a mountain. You are not rich. You are systemically indispensable and irreplaceable. We must observe the neurochemistry of the final authority. Within the garrison, your brain enters the foundational state. You are no longer searching for anything. You are the source. The serotonin of the Lord is no longer dependent on winning the hunt, but on the integrity of the order. You possess the absolute stillness that characterizes the apex predator in repose. This stillness is what generates the hierarchical mass that forces the environment to yield to your will without you ever having to broadcast a signal. You have moved from the frequency of the tenant to the frequency of the architect. You do not ask for your rights, you program your reality. Your internal law is the only accounting standard that survives the reset because you possess the caloric density to enforce it within your perimeter. The entropy of the democratic equality narrative is the final cage. The giants want you to believe that we are all in this together. No. In the persistence hunt, there is the garrison and there is the swarm. The sovereign predator focuses on atmospheric sovereignty. He reaches a point where he no longer cares about the laws of the state because he has built his own private state. He provides his own security, his own information, and his own economy. He is the owner of the substrate, and the matrix is merely a variable he accounts for in his final tally. He has achieved temporal dominance. He is the judge of his own eternity, and his silence is the wall that protects the purity of his code from the entropy of the hive. Recognition of this biological requirement is the only way out of the mud. You must move from the horizontal plane of the successful subject to the vertical axis of the sovereign auditor. You must stop protecting your resources and start garrisoning your existence. The hunt is not a financial strategy. It is a specific target acquisition of the total and irreversible sovereignty that defines your lineage. You must decide what you are. Are you the winner whose wealth is a beacon for the next systemic reset, or the sovereign predator who has sequestrated his reality to become the source of the next law? The primal code is not about guarding money. It is about sequestrating force for the purpose of dynastic immortality. Find the coordinate where the matrix can no longer reach your core and put all your metabolic weight on it. Stand up, audit your atmospheric leaks, and begin the final reset of your sovereign kingdom. The abyss is waiting for the visible, but the substrate is waiting for the sovereign. Stop defending and start architecting the silence.